Hi everyone, and welcome to Babbling Irons. Today you have myself and Sloth. Frankie is unfortunately feeling ill, so you'll have to bear with us, and we'll cover for him. Hopefully he feels better soon. But today we are here to talk all things around a certain man known as Thomas Souček, and obviously his current plight that he has at West Ham. So, Sloth, what do you think of the kind of current contract issues that are going on? What's your view?
I think it's a really interesting one because a lot of people are really citing his form of the last season as to why he shouldn't be getting these rewards, like the boost in the contract, or a new deal, improved wages, and I just don't buy it. Like, he comes across as a nice guy. I haven't mentioned this on here, but I met Souček at Petting Zoo, strangely enough. Lovely guy, like really nice. And
please tell me you got the bus there and back.
I got what off Souček? Sorry, that's a.
Oh. I know. I was saying, please say that Souček got the bus there and back.
No, he was with his family, so I won't say too much. But, and I didn't pester him, but he did feed a pig, which is not a sentence I ever thought I'd say. So, yeah, but
the West Ham exclusive right there.
Yeah, Souček feeds pig. There's a lot of snatch quotes we can take from that, but he was really nice, really down to earth, and that's what I hear repeatedly about Souček. Now, does that mean I can't picture him asking for big money? No, of course not. But my problem is where people say he doesn't deserve it, like or they knock his performances, because yes, he has dipped in form this year. That's unquestionable. However, we need to really look at why that is, as opposed to let's just kick him while he's down, because it has been nothing short of abysmal in terms of our midfield depth. And I love Noble. I have been very critical of him. I hold my hands up to that. I'm not going to hide behind it. But you cannot replace a guy who is scoring double digits, and like his that first season he joined, his running figures were way above and beyond the people around him. And I think he's gotten the best out of Rice by giving him a bit more freedom, and he's not complained. He's gone about it. He's worked hard, whether he's been good or not. He's gotten about his business, and I think had we signed someone in the summer a level above Kral, we'd have really seen a different midfield, because we'd have had that balance, and we'd have had the ability to rest Souček. And I think the lack of quality was the reason he was played as much as he was over starting Kral and rotating him in, because Moyes clearly just didn't trust him. So do I think he deserves the contract? Yeah, personally I do. I'd get him a contract as soon as we could, unless a mega bid comes in. You know, if 50 million pounds comes in, 45 million pounds, then I mentioned it a few of the videos ago. We need to learn when to sell. And as much as I like him, and there's very few centre mids who can get you double-digit goals, we've also seen his limitations this year. And I think if you're going to take 40 or 50 million pounds to reinvest in the side and potentially look at someone who can do a similar job, and be coached to push towards those figures, then we need to take that.
Yes, some of the arguments I've seen is that obviously he has 3 years left on his deal because he has a 1-year extension. Obviously the lack of consistency last year and the drop, so to speak. But also it's only really a drop in certain areas. And then in fact, if you look at some of his stats actually did improve. Some of his passing stats improved. Still not great in possession, but if you look at the numbers kind of show a small kind of numerical improvement, but not by much to kind of shift the dial. But obviously the goals weren't as frequent, and he maybe didn't seem as active or proactive as he was in the previous year. But do you think that the last 18 months, or these first 18 months, have been massively overlooked, where he came in, scored some vital goals to keep us in the Premier League? We have to be honest, he did do that. In the second year, won Hammer of the Year. He also got himself a joint top goal scorer. And do you think that fickle's probably not the right word, but it's the only one I can think of at this point, that we've been a bit too fickle in our assessment as in not needing a contract, when in previous years, if we'd have had a player after 18 months achieve that, we'd have been saying sign him up immediately, get him on a 5-year contract. Do you think there's some of that's been missed because of last year?
I mean, I don't know if you want me to say this, because I can hear the number 34 bus coming and you're about to push me in front of it. But I think
you jump in front of the bus, I'll go with you, Sloth. That's fine.
One of the problems is our fans are so unbelievably vapid. And I can be just as guilty in terms of, like, if I see a performance, I'm critical of it. I never slate the person. I like to make that clear, unless it's, a certain cat kicking incident, which I think is, but I don't criticize the person. I criticize the performance and the attitude, but I don't criticize the person. And I think so many of our fans forget the important goals he scored just because he had an off season. And if you're going to take an off season into account when you're looking at a player who has previously scored, then you're going to be looking at some serious players and going, well, he's had an off season. We're going to discount him because, he's had an off season. Antonio is our record goal scorer. And has he ever hit 20 goals a season?
No.
Has he hit close to 20 goals a season?
He probably would have come close this year had it not been for, just the tiredness and the lack of consistency. But there was a period where he was, at the rate he was going, 20 goals in the season wasn't looking unlikely.
And this could be this is one thing that I could, you could argue about squad depth. Having that boost could have got him there. Yep. But if you're looking at off seasons and you're saying, well, that's really going to judge how we give out contracts or we do our business, then you're going to be really struggling to improve long term. And for Souček, I think it's so easy to kind of take your anger out on him, particularly when we're losing someone as kind of emblematic as for West Ham as Noble, and you're giving that a bit of that energy towards him instead of where it needs to go. Where, when you're questioning his performances, what are you looking to say? Are you saying he's a terrible footballer and we shouldn't play him, or are you saying, well, actually, his performances were poor, he didn't get rotated enough, and there was no competition? You need to be able to understand why that is. Why wasn't there the competition? And analyze that on top of just kicking a man when he's down. Because I never watched the Souček performance and thought, my God, he was lazy. Whereas I don't want to seem like I'm kicking him when he's down, but Antonio against Brighton, When it was at home, I was fuming. I was saying, he's just standing there. And I get that I've just used the argument about players running themselves into the ground. But with Souček, I could see him running. And with other players, when we criticise their performances, it's not always even. So I think I would 100% give him a contract. But again, if a big bid comes in, you've got to know when to sell.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you there as well. He's one of those awkward players in that, in possession, you're not going to get the most secure or creative player. But what you also know is that you're going to have a consistent threat and presence in both ends of the pitch. So in both areas, he's always that. So indirect free kicks, he is an asset, whether defending or attacking, which again, he's so underappreciated. He puts in a good amount of work defensively as well with Rice to help protect that midfield. So it's whilst we also want to see more technical players, and I'm a person that loves to see technical players, and I'm often calling for us to get more technical players, but there's also that thing, and sometimes you need a player who's arguably a bit of a throwback, which what Souček is. He is that player that maybe wasn't great, but he would go and get you a goal, or he would sit in front of that defence. He will break things up. His pass to release a player may not be great, but he's always there to try and defend and give his all.
Yeah.
And personally, I would give him a contract, but again, it comes down to what are his wage demands. If his wage demands are ridiculous, then for me, hit the 1 year clause in his contract, essentially say that he's now on 3 years, and look to settle. If the argument is you're not going to offer him a contract and you don't necessarily see him worthy of that contract in terms of the size of the wage, then I think you've got to ask that question of, well, if you're not willing to do those things, then your only option really is to look for a sell, right? You can't build around, maybe they'll come a bit better next year and maybe I'll change my mind. It does happen. It's always happened in football, but again, you've probably got to be a bit more proactive with it, because obviously his 3 year contract takes him up to his 30. So start to get into kind of those more experienced years, and only from probably next season on, the money you've been talking around, which is potentially feasible, isn't arguably going to be as readily available for him or offered to us. So,
well, one thing I would say as well is that, how many goals did he get last season?
Last season it was 5 in the Premier League, that is.
And how many did he get the season before that?
I think he got 10 in total, I think, didn't he? So I think he drew level with Antonio.
Where else are we going to be able to find a 10-goal centre mid who will put in a shift and be happy to play not even a starring role, to Rice, to potentially Bowen, potentially Antonio? Where else are you going to find that player for a decent price? Like it's, people don't understand how hard that role is to fill, and we've seen Moyes do this time and time again, where he finds a player like that. We know the whole Fellaini saga with it. And Fellaini is another one who he's villainized, and he's kind of, people treat him like a Marmite player. But I bet you if you speak to Everton fans, they'll tell you, yeah, he wasn't always great, but you could rely on him. And apart from a couple of stupid tackles, and, we've seen Souček sent off wrongly, but the things with Fellaini and Souček, clubs like West Ham need to know that to replace a 10-goal a season midfielder is almost impossible for what you want, in terms of, if you want to find another £15 million midfield who's going to get you the sort of running stats that he did, the aerial duels, the the defensive work rate, that's a near impossible task. People are talking about Kamara and his move to Villa. And while I think he's a fantastic central defensive mid, he's never going to get you 10 goals. I'd like to be proven wrong by that, but there has been nothing I've seen in his game that has said in the future he's going to add goals to it.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. And I think, that probably leads us quite nicely, a nice little segue into James Ward-Prowse. So, we're talking about the need to replace, or potential need to replace, Souček, or at least possibly in David Moyes' mind is to bring in a player to supplement the midfield, to play alongside maybe Rice and Souček. But obviously we've been linked with the man that is James Ward-Prowse. And, we put this up on the account the other day, just kind of a little view as to, the two players and kind of how they match up. And obviously, as we've kind of pointed out already, the defensive work that you see in Souček is so high. Obviously, aerially, he is incredibly important. Obviously, the basically 8-1 kind of scale, or 8-2 kind of scale of headers is just a ridiculous point. I know when you think about, it's only 6 extra headers in a game, that's not much. But when you equate to where those headers can be in a game and those duels that he's winning or participating in, it's quite a substantial feat. But obviously, as this all points out, Souček isn't necessarily that secure in possession, whereas Ward-Prowse obviously offers a little bit more security and is obviously a bit more progressive in his passing. But again, when you look at the kind of progressive dribbles and things like that, he's not necessarily a player who's going to carry the ball further forward towards the goal. He's not going to progress on the goal a bit more or make those runs in which to then carry the ball that Souček does. So, with that in mind, is Ward-Prowse the answer? Or is it maybe, as I've said before, and it's not meant in a derogatory way, it's mainly because of the price, is it an indulgence that we do not need in this window?
One of the things, I'm gonna throw a bit of a spanner in the works, I think, mate, because one of the things that I do think is absolutely undeniable about James Ward-Prowse is his ability on the ball. And I don't just mean that from set pieces. I mean his passing range, and his first touch is great as well. So I think he's the answer to a question, but is that going to be a Souček replacement? Not in a million years. He doesn't offer that role. Would he be a great Lanzini replacement to step in front of him and Rice? 100%. He'd be really great. But is he really an out-and-out attacker? As you said, can he carry the ball? Not really. What you're kind of looking at is someone who will probably create with our team 10 goals minimum. And I just mentioned how hard it is to find that player for West Ham. We've just seen that it would probably cost what they said today, £75 million.
5 million. Yeah.
So for us to find another player who we can guarantee would get around 10 goals is going to cost £75 million. Do I think that's an indulgence? 100%. I think that's a terrible bit of business, if I'm being honest. I think he's a great player, but is it a good bit of business for West Ham? It's an awful bit of business. Is it a great bit of business for, say, Manchester City? Yeah, because they can afford to spend that. They don't really care. Is it a great bit of business for Liverpool? Potentially, because next year they could have Van Dijk in the box. They can have Konate in the box. They can have all these massive players, Nunes, getting ready in the box. But they've already got Trent Alexander-Arnold. who can deliver. So is it a great bit of business for us? For £75 million, no. For £35 million, yes. But the problem comes with people saying, we need him and get rid of Souček, because that is just baffling to me, because you're going to be left with the same problem we've had this year, where Rice will bomb forward and cover great areas of the pitch. Ward-Prowse will probably give him an option, an outlet, but Souček's going to be looking for the balls into the box, or he's going to be covering way back. So he's not going to be in the middle of the pitch. He's either going to be one of the two ends, and that way you don't solve the problem that we had defensively, or lack of defensive midfielder is the worry. Calvin Phillips is that kind of set piece specialist from deep. Do I want to spend £50 million on him? Not really. No. Again, he's another one who I think for £35 million is a great bit of business. But for me next year, I think the only real way to get the best out of Rice and Souček is to play in a 3. So we need a deep line builder and not really a James Ward-Prowse.
Yeah, so it's a great comment from Dave here. Probably echoes most of what we've said previously in the past around Souček and the team. But, as he says, ultimately it comes down to how we want to play and how we want to. Do we want to release Declan Rice? Do we want to indulge, his burgeoning talent and his ability to progress with the ball? And do we want to bring in more of a ball player? So, and if that is the case, we want to bring in more of a ball player. I guess that quite succinctly moves us into the next one of the potential Turkish delight, that is Kokçu. And I went there. And I've also checked out how to say his name. It's Kokçu. So,
Shisha.
Yeah. So I went and checked. I was getting the pronunciation right. But again, we've talked about that need or that want to have a player who can progress and who can move the ball forward. And we have to, again, we're going to, much like we did with Ward-Prowse, we're going to kind of bring up some statistics in relation to what we have with, obviously, Kokçu. Again, we need to prefix this with the fact that these statistics are from the Eredivisie. So, these are statistics based on his performance in that league, which is obviously of a lesser standard. So, whilst they do look very promising in possession and are much higher than Souček, we do have to obviously take it with a little pinch of salt, obviously, because of the standard of the league. But what it does paint the picture of is a player who's very comfortable in possession, who likes to carry the ball quite a lot. Obviously, there's a lot of progressive runs, especially particularly in relation to Souček. But also, when you look at his final third entries with his passing, his progressive passing, he's very much a forward-thinking player who drives a team forward. So, with that in mind, do you believe that Kokçu is a genuine target for the club? Do you think he is someone that you bring in to essentially replace, or someone you bring in to supplement? I know, as you said before, about Ward-Prowse maybe taking over as Lanzini role as that kind of number 8. Is that how you would see Kokçu as well?
I think he'd be fantastic in that role. One thing I will say about the Eredivisie is if you watch a lot of his goals, the defending is absolutely abysmal. Like it's embarrassingly bad. And I don't mean that in any disrespectful way to the Eredivisie. We've covered this a lot, but my favourite player is Clarence Seedorf. So, the Eredivisie for me is one of those leagues I've got a real soft spot for. And I would like us to sign and scout from there this season in particular. But I don't think you can look at anyone other than Sangare as the Thomas Souček replacement. I think Kokçu is great in terms of what he'll give you. He's tenacious. He's quite quick. He gets stuck in, and he one thing I really like about him is that he likes to play these little balls over the top. He plays these little floated chips, and they're brilliant. I think if we had someone like if we've got Bowen, if we've got Antonio bombing onto those, they would be picked up on, and they'd be creating real chances for us. But he's got a lot of time in the Eredivisie. And as I said, the standard there is just not the same. I would be probably generous in saying it's some of the defending is lower championship level. It's that bad. And if you don't believe me, go and watch some of the goals, because
it is at times it is Championship League One type defending. It is lax, shall we say.
Every defence has their off day. So I don't want to seem like I'm just kind of punching the Eredivisie, but just go and watch them and leave a comment and let me know what you think, because it's some of the goals are hilarious. But I think he'd be great in that kind of middle role, where what we need from him is to get stuck in, win the ball back, press defenders, press the opposition. And I mentioned on Twitter the other week about Nandes. Obviously, he's just been relegated from Serie A. And he's one who is probably less of a gamble, because the rumours are about £10 million. And I think he offers a lot of what Coach does, but from a more proven or
from a higher level. Yeah.
I would take a gamble if he's under or around £15 million. But
yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah, I tend to agree. You know, that you say the defending at times in the Eredivisie, it's not where it is. That's why the good players, they leave early. Let's put it that way. And there's a reason why they leave early.
What's funny is two of our top targets defensively are both from the Eredivisie. So
I know. But in our defence, Malacia, one of my favourites, he's proved in European competition this year how good he is, and he is the starting left back now for the Netherlands as well. So in our defence, there is a defence for them. But you mentioned Sangari, and obviously it's a player that both me and you love to use at Toulouse. But a player that kind of is quite similar, but also potentially available on that is Onana. Obviously, and we're talking about Amadou in this case, not Jean, who is just as good. But we're talking about Amadou here because obviously with the Lille's financial problems, you know, we talked about, again, trying to find a player who is like Souček and that can replace him. Sangari is one, obviously, that we've kind of mentioned. But Onana, probably, when you look across the leagues, is possibly the closest we'd find in a kind of top 5 league, bar maybe Jean Onana as well. That's a bit of a mouthful. Try saying that if you're drunk. Yeah. What's your view on Onana?
I think the thing with Onana is that when I mentioned about players you can look to mould into a Souček, he's the prime example. He is very much the one that, in my mind, I think Onana. It's a bit of a weird sense to say. But he's got the same athleticism, but he's more agile. He's got the same kind of ability to break up play, but win it aerially. However, he's not got the goals to his game. He's not bad in terms of his passing. It does need work going forward. However, if you're playing him in a bit more of a defensive role, or if you're looking to get that from him, then I think we're going to take what he offers as a positive, as opposed to, you're not relying on him to be a creative force. We don't rely on Souček to do that. But if he can win a header halfway into the opposition box, it creates chances for other people to get on the end of. And one of the things that I really like about Onana is just that it seems like when I watch him, he can be coached so much more. He's got so much physicality that I look at a lot of the players we're linked with, and I think Kevin Nolan would have a field day with that.
Yeah.
You know, he's if you want one player, ex-player, to be coaching someone on how to use their body, how to be a nuisance, it's Kevin Nolan. I know a lot of football fans won't think it's the most glamorous name, but he was a nightmare to play against. And
I remember being behind the goal watching West Ham versus Bolton and watching him and Kevin Davis just standing there pinching the West Ham players out a corner. And you just think but it's things like that. It's those little niggly things that you teach a player to do to get that edge. Like you say, Kevin Nolan's a prime example of that person he knows how to get into the opposition's head when he's on the pitch.
Yeah.
And I always look at Onana and think there's elements of a young Vieira in how he kind of strides through. He's often one of those players as well. When I look at Onana and go, if he added kind of the muscle mass, you also look at it and go, there's every chance he can be like a Yaya type. Like I say, he's that player that seems so moldable that you can have whichever midfielder you want, but you need to spend that time with him and give him that time. And I think he's that player you capitalise now, because in 1 to 2 seasons, he's either going to leave Lille this year and be at somewhere where the price is going to be prohibitive, or in the next year when you go back, their financial situation is better, and again the price becomes prohibitive not to go in. It feels like now is the time, maybe. Look at him.
He's got AC Milan written all over him in terms of they've lost the Onana in there would just be just winning everything, knocking it down for players like Leao, and just he fits that mold perfectly. But my one kind of thing with him is that because he's so young, I think we would want to rotate him in, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I think by the end of the season he'd be the starting player, but that would probably be best off in a 3. So if you have a 3 of maybe Souček slightly more advanced, or Onana more advanced, and then Rice, that is going to cause nightmares. That is going to cause problems. It's going to be
6 foot plus as well as a midfield to have. I think Rice is 6'2", Souček is about 6'4", and then Onana is 6'4", 6'5". To have that 3, and then obviously when you talk about set pieces as well, not only does it help you defensively, helps you in attack. And again, when we've seen it with Souček in games where he basically clears out for the defense. Obviously there's times where he doesn't win many headers if you look at some of the stats, but that's because he's also challenging centre forward, who's traditionally better in the air than midfielders. So he goes into challenges.
He scored one of the most important goals in our history. So
that glorious header versus Sevilla, it was brilliant. Also with Souček, he's a guy who puts his head where it hurts, and he's shown that twice this season with the wounds he's inflicted. But when you look at Onana, I think he probably is that closest we're going to find. Maybe other than that is Jean Onana. They're probably the closest in terms of young, inexpensive, shall I say, players. If we want to look, otherwise you've got to go into the 30-35 million bracket, potentially even more.
I think, we've heard that Newman is scouting Ligue 1 as his kind of preferred destination, and we know that Moyes likes it. But for me, one of the things that is really fascinating at the moment is just the whole financial and whole transfer situation in Ligue 1, where, if people don't know, there's a lot of teams being investigated for what could potentially be fraudulent transfer activity.
Lille's one of those as well.
Lille in particular are involved in this, and I obviously don't want to say too much. I don't know quite what the Lille lawyer force is like, but this is just from my point of view. This is not the view of Babbling Irons podcast. But
disclaimer.
Yeah. I'll get Lionel Hutz on the case. But the Lille look like they could be shafted, well and truly shafted in terms of business, and they can't sell to AC Milan, or they can't because of this whole joint ownership issue as well.
Yeah,
we know they want to sell to AC Milan because we've seen it with the Botman.
We also saw it with Sanchez before that broke down as well.
And it's quite a lot of French teams. I mean, at the moment, I think they've named 12.
Yeah,
but
it's almost the entire league that's been
and with Bordeaux in particular, where Jean Onana plays, we don't even know if they're going to be under contract next season. Could potentially be talking about picking up a free agent in a 6 foot lump.
You would argue. I would argue that is the epitome of a no-brainer. If he is a free player, you would snap that off, because he's in a Bordeaux team where they've been very poor. He's been exceptional, to be honest. There have been some very good performers in that Bordeaux team, but some of its parts have just been too poor.
But I mean, I've kind of taken us off on a tangent of French there, but as I say, it is the league to watch in terms of transfers, because there is potentially so much value, and that was one of the big reasons why that whole transfer issue I mentioned. But I think with Onana, even both of them, this is the time to buy. This is the time where this summer, I think what a lot of teams are doing is they're sitting back and they're waiting, seeing what's going to happen. If Onana is a free agent from Bordeaux, teams are just going to sit back and they're going to watch what happens, then move. With Onana at Lille, everyone knows Lille have to sell. Now they're under this investigation. They can't really sell to Milan. And we're just watching it and thinking there's bargains to be had there.
I think with Lille, it's a team that you ride out, because obviously the prices they're set for Botman, for David, you kind of look at that and go, if you're interested in those players, you're actually better probably waiting to the end of the window when they are in a position where they are almost forced to sell because they have to make money.
If they'd had a good league season this year, potentially you could have said, yeah, they don't need to sell, but they had a disastrous season.
Yeah.
So they are now they're going to be looking at all their assets and thinking, okay, we want to try and get as much money as possible, but potentially we're going to have to look at offloading before people start knocking at the door. So it's a really interesting saga going on in France, but I do think Onana would be my top pick to kind of be the Souček Mark II. But I think what's important to remember is we're not going to be able to go out and buy a centre mid who we know is going to replace him in terms of his output. And we either have to think long term, and potentially next season are we moving him on with this kind of protege next to him, or are we going to try and get what we can now but bring in 3 players, like a couple more kind of big athletic central midfielders and a more attacking one? Or are we going to try and cover this in a different way? Are we going to change how we play for his replacement?
Yeah, I certainly think we're probably going to need 2 players to replace his output. For me, the only way I can think of doing it, but again, it depends on, we would need 40, 50 million quid to kind of do this. But for me, it would be Onana, whether that be Jean or Amadou, because I do think they're quite similar in the sense of what they can offer. And it's the guy that I always talk about Coop Miners. Yeah. He is the only midfielder I can think of who realistically makes those runs that he does, who can score brings good set pieces, knows how to take a fierce penalty as well. He's the only player that I can think of in Europe that kind of can bring those goals from midfield or from a deep position in midfield that we require. But again, you lose out on that defensive side, that aerial side. So you would need someone like Anana to be in there to kind of sit and rotate with Rice and maybe even Coop Miners as to who sits, who holds, who goes forward and so on. But, you know, that as a midfield three, I think is incredibly hard to not only one, get past, but two, to get the ball off of in some occasions, because that would be quite a strong midfield and ultimately takes it to a different level. But we'll end the kind of the Souček talk there, and we'll kind of go on to a bit more of maybe a flight of fancy kind of rumours, ones that maybe not going to come about, but, you know, it's nice to be linked. But, you know, the kind of call of Scamacca and Raspadori feels like the kind of boom or bust type deals. You know, it's those ones where you go all in, or you just kind of, we're not going to do it. And obviously there are some reservations. It was pointed out earlier, and quite rightly so. Last time we went for an Italian up front, it didn't work out so well. But
I don't know what you mean. I don't know what you're talking about.
It never happened. He had a great game against Crystal Palace from memory, and then he never played again. So that was all he did. He played that one great game. But yeah, no, we've had some really interesting kind of links in Scamacca and Raspadori. Obviously, Raspadori's played not as a striker this season. He's played more as an attacking midfielder. And for me, it seems like we've identified potentially the player that we view as a Lingard replacement or on a Lingard alternative due to how he plays and can play off the striker. And obviously, Scamacca makes logical sense. He scored a lot of goals this season, and you know, he's been quite of a fulcrum for the guys at Sassuolo. Yes, but so what are your thoughts?
I think Scamacca is absolutely fantastic. You know, 6'5". The guy looks like he's just stepped off a catwalk. And, you know, he's going to help sell you shirts anywhere. He's the kind of, you know, potential poster boy for Italian football for the next 10 years.
Gucci model in waiting.
100%, like 100%. He's, you know, when we think of Italian footballers, I mean, my mind, ironically, I think it goes to Totti. Like,
yeah.
That's
to be fair, you know I love Totti, so you want to talk about Totti, we can scrap the rest of it and we can talk about Totti.
This is some these are some interesting sound bites, aren't they? When we think about these Italian players, we think about, you know, these just sexy football is what I remember it being described as. You know, we think of sexy football, players who make football look good, but look good doing it.
Yeah, mercurial, I think, is the other term.
Yeah, that's a better one. But Scamacca is one of those players who he's going to be an absolute nightmare to play against. And again, like, he's not people. I saw the link with Sasa Kalashnic today.
Yeah.
And what annoys me is that a lot of people look at players who are that tall and they go, oh, they're just going to be a target man, like Haller, and, you know, they're not the most mobile. Well, no, actually, you haven't watched them play. It's clear that you haven't watched them play. Scamacca works hard. He's pretty mobile. He's not going to be an Antonio and you know, chasing defenders down and dropping deep and he's not going to be doing that. But what he is going to be doing is giving you a focal point. He's going to be stretching defenses, and he's going to be winning knockdowns. He's going to be winning every aerial ball or scrapping for every aerial ball sent his way. One of the reasons I think Raspadori would work for us is because he has that Scamacca, or he has an Antonio. Would he be my first choice for that position? No, like, just he wouldn't be. And I like Raspadori, but I think he's I think he's too lightweight for the Premier League. And I mean, you could say that about a lot of players who've proven that wrong. But with those players, I always think they have just generally some sort of physical asset, whether it's their strength, whether it's just outright pace that will carry him through it. And Raspadori is quick, but I don't know if it's quick enough to completely cancel out how kind of lightweight he is.
Yeah.
Someone like Hazard had that incredible lower body strength. For me, Raspadori doesn't really have that. So I would be looking at someone else for that kind of role. I think Scamacca would 100% be near the top of my targets list. But Raspadori, I think is he going to be a Lingard? Like, he's got a fairly similar style, but again, he's a little bit too lightweight. And I think for me, I would prioritize other players in that position. And I would be focusing on Scamacca out of the two of them. I think he's got one of those strikes of the ball where it feels like he doesn't get a lot of backlift to get power. Like he just absolutely, like, to quote Partridge, he's got a foot like a traction engine. It's ridiculous.
If anyone wants to see that in action, go and watch the Milan game. The goal he scores outside the area. Winan, who has been one of the best goalkeepers in Serie A this season, was just left flat-footed. He just watched it go into the top corner. It was superb goal. And, even if we kind of look at Raspadori, over the course of this season, again with Antonio, you can see where the differences are in the two players. And, again, there is a complete difference. There are obviously their trade-offs. But again, it's an interesting thing that we're clearly looking at different profiles in players. There's obviously, to me, when you look at the links to the big guys, there has been definitely a look at players who can be a threat at set pieces a lot more. But, the things that stand out to me as well is that with Scamacca, it's easy to say because of his size, as you say, that he's essentially a static kind of player. But he plays in probably the most attractive team to watch in Syria, who have probably one of the most dynamic and rotational forward line with the four they essentially have up front. And Berardi plays very much like Bowen. And that's one of the things I like with the Raspadori thing is Bowen, he will be used to the Bowen type runs. And as an attacking midfielder coming from deep, he's unlikely to go into the same space because he's used to that with Berardi. But with Scamacca as well, when he does shoot, to your point, there's very little backlift. Pretty much 50% of all of his shots are on target. Is an incredible kind of statistic. And again, his conversion rate is phenomenal. If you can bring that to the Premier League, there's I think the last Italian striker that I can think of who really did incredibly well was Grazia Pelle. That's the last one I remember who was at Southampton at the time.
Yeah.
He was genuine at times. He was brilliant, very much similar kind of profile. And obviously, when you look at Scamacca, you do think he's one of those players. He's got a bit of a swagger about him. Obviously, he's had the comparison to Zlatan, obviously, because of, basically he's covered in head to toe in tattoos and he has that swagger about him. Obviously, I think when people refer to certain players when it's all like Brozier as an Arnautovic, it's the furthest away from a comparison of Arnautovic I can possibly think of. Scamacca is more in that mold, that player who likes to get on the ball, will dribble with it a bit, not too much, but he likes to get involved. He likes to be that kind of player. And then again with Raspadori, you look at him in comparison to, say, Fornals. When we're talking about how he dribbles, he likes to get on the ball, he's secure when he's dribbling it. To your point, he's not the biggest or the strongest, but he does score goals. He doesn't tend to need much space in which to shoot or to take a go at goal. Again, not necessarily that secure in possession, but that type of player, you're not necessarily bringing in for their security. You're bringing them in to be decisive in those final moments, which is, I guess, why we probably looked at him as an alternative. I guess the pinch point is going to be the cost with these two. Why we said it's a boom or bust kind of situation. Do we go all in, potentially get two very good players who are used to playing with each other? Or is it a bust? Do they come into the league? Do they not settle because Syria is different to the Premier League? And there hasn't been many successful Italian players that have necessarily kind of migrated away from Italy and done well in the Premier League and so on in recent years. So I guess the question we really need to ask is, of the two, I'm pretty sure I know where you're going to go with this, but who would you be taking out of the two? And would you be willing to take a punt on both if the prices were fair?
If the prices were fair, I think, yeah. I think bringing players who know each other is something that you can't replicate that chemistry. You can't just go out and buy two players and expect them to immediately tune in. I mean, I haven't seen that since, since probably when Man United had Andy Cole, and two players who just instantly knew how to play with each other. And even Son and Kane, I mean, maybe they're probably the modern day equivalent, but it's, I have my reservations about Raspadori, not from a point of quality. It's literally just that Serie A hang up of kind of, it's going to be a very different thing every week playing against defenders who are in the top six, or even, to players scrapping for their lives at Nottingham Forest. A Joe Worrell, playing against a Joe Worrell at the back is going to be very different to what he's used to. And Italian defenses are great, but they're much slower. And
yeah, it's a much more tactical game.
And I think out of the two, I'd 100% pick Scamacca, so much so that I think, for me, I really like Brozier. If he is Moyes' top target, back him, go for him. But I have a lot of reservations about him. With Scamacca, I think he's ready-made, and I think he's good to go. I think he's going to come in, and first few months, he might look a bit off the pace, but he's 6'5" and he's excellent in the air. With the type of football we play, he's going to get chances. And as he's such a kind of swaggering player on the football pitch, as soon as he gets a goal, his confidence is going to go sky high. So I think there's very little chance that he flops. I think he could easily be a player who scores 10 goals, 12 goals, and around that figure for 2 seasons. And West Ham fans maybe go, could we have spent that money better? But that would honestly be what I'd say he's going to be bare minimum, because I think he creates you absolute mayhem in the area, and from set pieces.
And I think the important thing is there, you said, 10 goals. People might think, can it be spent better? But if we're realistic, how many players have we had that's exceeded that? And Neltovic in recent years is the only player I can think of that has exceeded and gone into, kind of over 10. Even Antonio, when you look at the league, this is the league we're talking about, we tend not to have a striker that is as prolific as that. So anyone who can go into, 10, 12, 13, 14, that's money well spent for a club like us. Yeah. Especially if you can supplement the goals from elsewhere, which we seem to be doing a lot more now with Moyes, which is obviously a great thing. It would be a good good player to have. And I think the important thing is he will create havoc in the area, around the area. He's one of those players that will just create panic because of the sheer size of him. And he will draw players. So obviously he was inconsistent, but Andy Carroll was that player who just created panic in the box, and you would get opportunities purely because players would gravitate to him because they had to. You couldn't allow that person to have a run and you have something to attack. So I do think Scamacca is probably the more suited. Raspadori I do like. It's that conversation as to, is he robust enough to operate in the league? But again, if Moyes likes him, Moyes wants him, great. It's just nice to see us linked with good, solid international players who are attracting the names of Inter Milan, PSG, and so on. These is not just merely us dropping these names just to make them sound better. These are genuine interest and genuine, players that are wanted by elite teams, and we are at this point seemingly having a chance with these, and that's something that you've got to praise the club for. And we know we've done great, but it's interesting where we go and what happens in the next few weeks. I'm sure as of tomorrow, Scamacca and Raspadori were never even a reality.
Yeah.
And we're never going to sign them. But again, it's the links are a positive step, I believe, for us as a club, and it's showing that we have agents and people wanting to be associated with the club as opposed to not wanting to have any interest from us.
Yeah. I think as well, it's quite it's quite easy for players when they're asked about links to go, no, I'm not going to move. Whereas what we're seeing in this window is that they're a great club, and or players, they're not necessarily saying, oh, West Ham, what a team, but they're saying, West Ham are a great side in the Premier League. And I think we saw it with that Brazilian centre-back we were linked with, where he's directly quoted as saying, West Ham are a team in Europe and who I would like to, who are doing things I would be flattered and being linked with them. And what a nice change that is from us thinking, we got no chance with this guy.
Exactly. And I think on that positive note is where we bring the show to an end. Obviously, we can go on for ages talking about players that we can bring in and so on. But I think what we've kind of covered today is that we do believe that Souček does deserve an opportunity. But again, it's within the boundaries and the bounds of, is it a fair and reflective deal? But again, you always have to view as to when is the time to sell, and maybe now is the time. And there are options out there as well. So we shouldn't be concerned with where we did the move. So if we did make that move, we did allow him to go. But there are players out there that we can do, and the likes of, again, when we look at other areas, when we Raspadori and Scamacca, things are looking positive. I'm still, still in the land of it's West Ham, so there's always that slight trepidation, but things are moving in the right step, and there's a clear step up in caliber of players that we're looking at, and everything's great at the moment. It's been a good season. The summer started off well with the signing of Ogard. So, long may it continue. And hopefully next week we'll see Areola finally putting on the shirt permanently for the club.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully we really have made a soundbite special today. We've had...
we really have, yeah.
Party. But no, I think it's going to be a window that really defines us, and hopefully with what we've seen already, as you say, it's just been so good to see. So hopefully that continues a long way.
Exactly. So with that, we'll bid everyone adieu. Have a good evening, and come on, you Irons.
Come on, you Irons.